To the library studio here of the YAHOWAH blog. I'm your host, Craig Winn. We're here with another episode of the Antichrist. It's an interesting term for a lot of reasons, in which I would like to begin this program by discussing them. First, by using Yahweh's statements regarding his beloved Son, our Messiah, the former and returning King of Israel, the chosen one, who is Dod, known to many as David. God proves conclusively that the Son of God is Dod, that Dod is the Messiah, that Dod is the returning King, and that Dod is his firstborn, and that Dod is our Savior. In his Psalms, Dod speaks all about this, affirming it, even describing the way that he would fulfill Passover by being crucified, providing the only eyewitness account of the event 1,000 years before it occurred. You see, Dod, rather than having two lives, has three. Most of those who accept the benefits that Dod is providing by opening the doorway to extended life through fulfilling Passover and perfecting our souls so we can enter God's home, all covenant members who take advantage of these things will have two lives. There are three people that we know for certain will have three lives. Not a big deal to add a intermediary life. Dod needed the second of his three lives to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim in 33 CE. Eliah will need the second of his three lives to fulfill the job of serving as one of the two witnesses during the last days. And Yada, who will serve as the Adamah Parah and offer the sacrifice that reunites Yahweh with his people, purifying the final mortal remnant of Yisrael prior to Dod's return with Yahweh, will also live three lives. Not difficult for God. All he has to do is to take the one soul, which is now immortal in all three cases, and in the case of every member of the covenant who has accepted the conditions that God laid out, of which there's 5 for covenant participation, and who have also availed what God has offered through the Moed Mikre, these invitations to be called out and meet with God. They will all have two lives, with one being in a physical body and the other being immortal, being akin to light, being spiritual in nature, having their soul continue all the way through that process, but rather than being yoked to a physical body, which is so imperfect, so limiting, both in space and time, and degrading, they will be immortal. Now, there are three people that God's going to have one additional life. And those three people need a physical body to perform a sacrifice where they offer their bashar, their physical body, to fulfill something that God has promised and is now offering. And so all God has to do is use their DNA to reconstitute a physical body for them. Their soul re-inhabits it, that physical body, and then that physical body can be sacrificed. It's not a big deal. I don't know why people are all hung up on it or why they think it is difficult, but the fact is that Christianity was dead wrong when Paul and Peter both spoke of Dod being dead, excluded from heaven, and somewhere in a grave rotting. His physical body and his first life decomposed, meaningless. His soul went directly to heaven to be with Yahweh, and his soul was then put in a second physical body that Yahweh created for the purpose of fulfilling Passover. And in the case of Yada, at the end of this phase of his life, which will conclude on Shabuah, the 11th of June of 2027, he will be brought back in a quasi-physical body, along with Eliah, to serve as one of the two final witnesses. Both Eliah and Yada, offering their physical bodies at that time. Myself on on Towrah, the 24th of September of 2033, as the Adamah Parah, and Elia as the goat, whose blood is then also used to anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant along with the bulls. So he will give up his physical body. Now, for those who think, oh, wow, why would God allow that? It's something that we are willingly offering. And while there will be trauma associated with the bludgeoning, as it occurred with Dowd on Passover when the Romans crucified him, and as it will when Satan bludgeons me to death on Towrah, I think it'll be painless for Elia. The very fact is that we are all eager to be rid of our physical bodies. Physical bodies are a liability. That's why that whole Christian myth of bodily resurrection is just so unbelievably stupid. You don't conquer death by going back into another physical body. Physical bodies are extremely limiting. They all degrade, they decay, they are hugely imperfect. And so we're all happy to be rid of ours because it allows us to be eternal in time, to be seen as perfected, to be able to travel through dimensions into Shamayim, even in the seventh dimension. So this is something we need to know. Now, as it relates to Dowd, what I have proven conclusively using the Word of God, and it's irrefutable, that the Savior is Dowd. That Dowd is the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim in 33 CE. That he is the Son of God. That he is the Messiah. That he is the returning King. All that being true, guess what? There's no room for a Jesus. Not only is that name absurd, there was no one named Jesus in the first century. There's no one named Jesus associated with God. There is no prophecy pertaining to a Jesus. And Christ is, again, another dunderhead move. The title is Messiah. Titles don't get changed to go from Hebrew to Greek. The title is Messiah. And if you want to replicate that title in Greek, you say Messiah. It's just like saying Genghis before Khan as opposed to king. It's like saying Caesar before Augustus as opposed to king. It is like saying Pharaoh before Tutmos as opposed to saying king. These are the titles that were used in that language, and we replicate the sound, transliterate the sound of those titles. Messiah is a title. It should have been replicated in Hebrew if you wanted to speak of a Messiah, but they didn't. They wanted a Mr. Christ. They wanted somebody that was differentiated from Hebrew. And they made a terrible mistake because Christ, the basis of it, the verbal root, Chriso means to be drugged. But the fact of the matter is there's only one Messiah who means anything to Yahweh. There's only one person he anointed 3 times. There's only one person he said he anointed personally with his own hand. There's only one person that he says is his Messiah, and it is that Messiah that he announced is our Savior, and that's Dowd. There's only one person that God says, this is my son, I am his father, and he did 3 times. That's Dowd David. He doesn't mention a Jesus as his son. He doesn't mention a Jesus as the Messiah. It's all a complete and utter fiction, a total lie. And it's so obvious that it's just astonishing that there could be 2.5 billion Christians that believe such preposterousness. Because to call Jesus the Son of God, to say that Jesus was God, to say that Jesus is a Lord, to say that Jesus even lived, to say that Jesus is the Savior, is to call God a liar. Because God said that Dowd David is the Savior, his son, the Messiah. And it's for damn sure that Dowd was not God. God don't fit into a human body. All of God won't even fit into our universe. So the whole notion is absurd, and God most certainly can't die. And you don't resolve death through going back into a physical decaying body. The whole aspect, every aspect of it is craziness, and yet you've got a religion named Christianity off this mythical Christ. So, there is no Christ. Therefore, I like the title of this series, Antichrist, because I am anti-Christ, as should everyone be. If you're informed, if you know what Yahowah actually says, if you give a hoot about God, and you care at all about not only his beloved son, David, but you appreciate what he did in fulfilling Pesach Matzah Makurim, opening the doorway to life, removing your guilt so that you can be part of the covenant family if you accept those terms and conditions, then you should be repulsed at the idea of a Jesus Christ. It's disgusting. Nothing you could do is more hateful to God than to be a Christian. So, I'm Antichrist, as should you be. Yahowah, God, is Antichrist. Now, there is a person that through their eschatology, particularly from the book of Revelations, which is a really average job of plagiarizing. Revelation is plagiarized and paraphrased from God's actual prophets with a layer of added fluff on top of it. Many things that it says that are plagiarized from God's prophets are true. What's plagiarized from Ezekiel, for example, its number one source, is all untrue. Ezekiel was not an actual prophet. That book is more demonic than it is anything else. There is no Magog. There's no Magog war. There's no Gog. There's no Valley of the Dry Bones. There's not going to be another temple built, particularly the monstrosity that is there. The images of God were actually from Babylonian astrology. So no. And in that regard, Revelation is dead wrong. But Revelation has this image of an antichrist figure, so Christians are looking for him. And I've identified him. The great betrayer, God calls him the son of evil, is now very well known. And it's easy to identify him because not only did Gabriel, who happens to be Dode, God's most capable and courageous, competent man, not only did Gabriel, as Dode, visit with Daniel in 555 BCE, laying out the future timeline of humanity, he specifically told us that this great betrayer would be the one who undercuts Israel at or before Shabuah in the last days by offering to give up Israel to terrorists. And we read the same thing in Isaiah, the 17th and 18th chapter, not only describe thinning Israel at the waist, affirming this treaty that will be made with many that represents the work of the great betrayer, this Antichrist figure, but he also ascribes the event to Shabuah. The Shabuah that is 7 years before their return is the 22nd of May of 2026. And the description that is provided both by Gabriel in Daniel and by Yeshaya Isaiah describes one man from one country. And it is so overwhelming in terms of the evidence that it is obvious that this demon-possessed man who is so destructive to his country and to God's people and to the world is President Donald Trump. So this program also serves to expose and condemn him. And to do so effectively, one of the things you want to read is the 14th chapter of Isaiah, Yeshaya, because in it, Halel ben Shakar, which is Satan's actual name, Satan means the adversary, is exposed. And as it turns out, the description of his attitude, aptitude, and perversions are, again, a perfect match for Satan. In fact, Satan has a type. If you look at the two most influential men in history who openly admitted that they were demon-possessed, you'd have Muhammad, who both at the beginning and at the end of his presentation of Allah and Islam, both at the beginning of Ramadan, where he had the vision and the experience of being demon-possessed in the cave, he admitted that I have been demon-possessed. And just before he breathed his last, he admitted again that he was demon-possessed. And of course, the Quran is filled with odes to demons. There are even surahs in the Quran that are dedicated to demons. Allah is indistinguishable from Satan throughout the Quran. So he spends all of his time in hell. But Paul also admitted to being demon-possessed. He said so in his second letter to Corinth. The last chapter acknowledges that he is controlled by Satan, and that Satan found him an interesting victim because of the fact that he had a gargantuan ego. He was a narcissist. So these two men, the two most influential men in history, that created the two most popular religions, Christianity and Islam, both admitted to being demon-possessed, and they both are a type. Paul admitted to being a sexual pervert. Yes, Paul admitted to being egotistical. Paul was an avid liar. Everything he said about God, he truncated from the context it was presented and then twisted the citation so that it no longer resembled what God actually said. He lied from the beginning to the end. And Paul is the person who wrote the first 14 letters of the Christian New Testament, and he created the myth of Jesus by robbing God's son, to David, of his titles and achievements and acclaim, and then slathered on a heavy dose of Dionysus so that the man could appear like a god and die and be resurrected, which is from Dionysus. And so if you look at Paul, you see Donald Trump. But if you look at Muhammad, who was also a rapist and a pedophile, who was a man who was clearly a psychopath, who lied at every occasion, who had no empathy, who destroyed everyone who spoke out against him. He killed every journalist in Arabia. And then he betrayed Jews, even after Jews provided the Quran, because it was rabbis selling Talmud stories that created the religiosity of the Quran. Satan has a type. Muhammad and Paul are his type, as is Donald Trump. So this series is on exposing and condemning him. It did not emerge because I wanted to identify the antichrist. I really didn't give a hoot. It means nothing to me. I don't care who fills that role. My job is to speak for Yahowah and to expose and condemn religious and political lies so that the truth is heard, the truth is understood, and it's without purging the lies, for example, of Christianity and the lie that there was a Jesus Christ and the lie that Jesus was the Son of God and that he was the Messiah and that he was the Savior and that it was he that was crucified, when in fact all of those accolades belonged to David. And he actually fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, and that he told us he was going to do so, when he was going to do so, to the exact day, and where he would do so, even why he would do so. You can't process that reality. The lies have been piled on top of the truth, which is what Satan's intent was all along. And the same thing is true with Islam. If you don't understand the motivations of Muslims acting out in the manner of Muhammad and following Allah's orders, Israel won't exist long enough for there to be a mortal remnant in the end. So it's important that I expose and condemn these religions, and I do so. I've written 10 books that do so, in the Twistianity series and also the Goddamn Religion series. So there's 10 volumes of Goddamn Religion that detail every aspect of the Quran, put it in chronological order, reestablish it in the context of Muhammad's life, documenting every aspect of it, proving that, well, Allah was not God and that Muhammad was not a prophet, and that Islam is devoted to the eradication of humanity. And my purpose in exposing and condemning Christianity wasn't to save Christians from them, because they can't be saved from it. They won't listen. It was to not only spare God's people from the continued harassment that they have received by Christians, because Christians, the New Testament demonizes and dehumanizes Jews. That's just the bottom line. You cannot be an honest Christian and not hate Jews. The New Testament requires it of you. It demeans and dehumanizes, demonizes Jews. And so it's important that I expose and condemn those lies so people can be receptive to the truth. So that is the reason that we do these things. Now, the reason that we came upon the identity of the Antichrist, this great betrayer of Israel, is because I wanted to go back into Daniel, where there's some very specific demarcations of time. 2,300 days, 1,290 days. Throughout the book, there are very specific presentations of time. The Moedim, or Moedim, Moed, and a half, tells us that that many of these events are going to play out over 3.5 iterations of the 7 opportunities to be invited to meet with God. And so I wanted to make certain that we had our dates right, based upon everything that can be learned from Daniel. And while I was there, it just became obvious that when describing this evil individual that is going to be part of a confederation that of other like-minded fools, is going to turn on Israel and force Israel to give up its heart as part of a 2-state solution that's going to be such that Israel is indefensible, and the last battle is an all-Islamic assault against God's people, where millions die, and probably billions worldwide. So that's how we came into this series, and we turned to Yahowah 14. We are now in the towards the conclusion of that, probably in the middle of it. 14:13 is what we are considering at this moment, and I want to return to it now. So everybody's up to speed. We know why we call the series Antichrist, who the Antichrist is, what the timeline is, and who the players are that are involved. I hope so, because Satan is now possessed. He is literally embodied Donald Trump. That is why he is in full confabulation mode. It is why he is in total duplicity mode. It's why he is so grotesquely arrogant, why he is so uncontrollably dishonest. It is why he fights so hard to be associated with the sexual perversion of his past, even though that is what he craved. It says, because you yourself, this is speaking of Hillel ben Shakar, the adversary, Hasatan, because you yourself said in your judgment and based upon your inclinations from your point of view, which you have taken to heart and determined, that you said you would rise, you would ascend, and you would be continually exalted in the spiritual realm of the heavens, over and above the stars of the most luminous in the highest places and the best and the brightest of God. You said, I will lift up and exalt, increasing my throne, my seat of honor, and I will establish and inhabit a dwelling place on the mount of the eternal witness to the restoring appointments, in association with the distinct boundaries from the depths below and the summit above, to conceal along that which is treasured. That's Isaiah 14:13. Sometimes when I look at something like this and I see a treasure in every word, I'm prone to share everything that I can with you, but I'm afraid that it might even be overwhelming in this regard. But I'm going to do my best to stay on topic and make our way through what was just said. Okay. Hasatan is a unique individual being. He's not multiples. There's not multiples of them. There's one of him. He is finite in his persona. He is infinite in terms of time. He is clever, but not omniscient by any means. He makes all sorts of claims in the Quran that he knows all, he hears all, he sees all, he does all, he has no limits, and that's just factually untrue. He is very limited in what he can achieve, and he is singular in his existence. And by being an eternal being and having been around for now the 6,000 years of the human experience in and out of the garden, he has learned a great deal. He does not act very smart, however. He just isn't all that clever. I would say he was reasonably clever in his pursuit of Towrah in the garden, because he found that all he had to do was change one word and something Yahweh had told Adam, and it was sufficient to lead Towrah down the wrong path. But Towrah was already well along her way before this cherub came off the wall to speak to her. And he did not speak to her in the form of a snake, but that certainly was the serpentine nature of his attack. And it is the same strategy that Hasatan used in the Christian New Testament with Paul. It's change a word here and there, misrepresent something God said, and what you have is something that's believable. Because like I had a friend that a person I actually like on X, who wanted to suggest that Charlie Kirk couldn't be anti-Israel because he was studying the Shabat and starting to write a book about the Shabat. Oh, my point is exactly the opposite. It is when you combine right and wrong, that makes you considerably more deceitful. Those who come and make a claim that is all wrong are not believed by anybody. It's when you babble, when you create a mix, a commingling of truth and lies to confound and to confuse, that you become far more deceitful, far more effective in promoting the lie. And such is the case with the Christian New Testament. It mixes truth with lies. It takes statements that Yahweh actually made, takes words out of them, adds words to them to create the antithesis of what God said. And so you're mixing truth with lies. And that is what makes Christianity susceptible to convincing people who don't do their homework, who don't know what God actually said, and choose to believe the lie. So he said, because you yourself said in your judgment and based on your inclinations. All right. So as a unique being, Hasatan, and he was one of the original cherubim in the plural. He was tasked with guarding Eden, which is why Towrah was aware of him. And it was Towrah, it's not Eve. It means to state one's mind. It does not mean life giver. It's based on Towrah, the verb, not che, which is life. Now, in his case, he has the ability to express his ambition. He can advance his thinking. Now, there is this myth, and I have been one that was taken in by it previously, that it is possible for Hasatan to have the ability to go rogue on his programming, if you will. Listen, we are told in Yeshaya that Yahweh created him, that he created both good and evil. And God uses both for a specific purpose, which is to make certain that those who choose him do so with a viable alternative to choose religion over the relationship. And so we have adversarial schemes and adversarial players because it is necessary so that free will has some considerable merit, so that there is a filter mechanism on who is allowed to become immortal, spending eternity with God. God doesn't want a lot of people. He wants some very refined, intelligent, devoted, hardworking, steadfast people who are right about him and who valued being right about him. And so that is why Hasatan as a cherubim was specifically programmed to do as he's done. He didn't. It wasn't a happenstance that he snuck into the garden and secretly deceived Chawah. He was there to do exactly that. And it isn't by chance that he created Judaism and Christianity and Islam, really on very similar premises. He was directed to do that. And the purpose is to cause the vast majority of people to be excluded from heaven because they were so thoughtlessly deceived. And the reason I say that he was encouraged to do so and that God actually wanted that to occur is that the more I began to study Christianity and wrote 5 volumes like this, this happens to be volume 2 of 5, is that when you actually compare what Paul wrote and Luke and Peter, Matthew, to what God said, it's obvious, immediately obvious that they were lying. When you read about a God being a man, you know that they're lying. When you read about Jesus even existing and being the Son of God and the Messiah, you know they're lying because God said exactly the opposite. So it's so easy to disprove the Christian New Testament as a horrible forgery that if you're going to be susceptible to it, God doesn't want any part of you. I mean, eternity is a long time. He's not looking for stupid. God does not do stupid. Now, Islam, as I shared my research here, the Quran's the dumbest book ever written. It is overtly demonic. It is overtly sadistic. And so there's every reason for any intelligent person to reject it. The notion that you go off and kill people, that you get multiple virgins in paradise, and yet you're restricted in what you can do sexually on earth, but the reward is unbridled sexuality in heaven. I mean, it's just absurdly stupid. Muhammad was vile. He was a rapist. He was a pedophile. He was a mass murdering terrorist. He was the antithesis of a prophet, and he never had a single prophecy. Paul didn't either. Paul had 0 correct prophecies. Muhammad had 0 correct prophecies. It is so obvious to disprove it. And God, in his Torah, the 18th chapter, provides a very systematic way to go about determining whether someone spoke for him or not. And everyone in the Christian New Testament, but particularly Paul, who is the inspiration for it, the creator of Jesus, fails at every turn, as does Muhammad, as does Allah. So God provided these such that if you're going to be a dunderhead, good for you. Goodbye. You're done. Yeah, it's like conspiracy. It's one of Satan's favorite playgrounds. It's so obvious that these conspiracies are untrue. I mean, blame the Jew conspiracy is the oldest of them. And every aspect of it, it's the opposite of what they claim. There's so little truth to the conspiracy and so much lie that God's saying, if you want to be a conspirator, go away. You know, this mother goddess cult that broke away from us was comprised entirely of people who came from a conspiracy cult. And the moment they broke away to pursue another conspiracy, they got the head of the conspiracy cult that they originally were associated with, joined hands with them again. And if you're dumb enough to be part of that, goodbye, good riddance. It's a filtering mechanism. And so Satan was programmed to do as he's doing. He is Dod's adversary. He is Yahowah's alternative. Yeah, alternative in the sense that he is offering a billionth less, and even then, everything he is offering is negative. Well, everything Yahweh is offering is infinity and brilliant and wonderful and emancipating and edifying. But there's obviously a lot of people who are intrigued by the option of Hasatan. Now, here it says that he will ascend, rise up, and be continuously exalted. Now, as the serpent, is he going to be exalted? No. As the dark, devilish guy with, horns and either red or black, is he going to be exalted? No. As the adversary under that title, is he going to be exalted? No. So, what does Hasatan have to do to ascend, rise up, and be continually exalted? When you understand this, you will understand religion. You will understand Judaism. You'll understand Islam. You'll understand Christianity. You'll even understand the religious overtones of Marxism. What does Hasatan have to do to be seen as exalted, to rise above, to be superior, to be worshipped, to be seen as a deity? He has to shed the adversary title, doesn't he? And so in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, the adversary title is shredded. But the Lord, whom they exalt, is in fact the adversary. And so you have in Islam and Christianity and in Judaism a Lord. And that Lord is not Yahweh. Yahweh doesn't even want to be a Lord. He wants to be a father. The Lord who wants to control with rules and laws and edicts and demands is Hasatan. He is the God of religion. And that is how he ascends. And he cannot achieve that unless he denounces the Satan or adversary title, which is why you see in religions Satan negating the Satan title. He doesn't want to be worshipped as the adversary. No, he wants to be worshipped as if he were a god. And that requires him to negate and to fight the satanic title. I'm here to tell you that is one of the most profoundly important revelations you will ever hear. And I don't think it's ever been explained anywhere else. And oh, by the way, the term that was used, the verb, I will ascend, I will rise up, I will be exalted, is Allah. I will rise. And he wants to be considered as having established his presence in the spiritual realm of the heavens. And as a seven-dimensional construct that Yahweh created, or certainly with sufficient dimensions as a non-physical being, he had access at one time to the spiritual realm of the heavens. He's been there. He's been cast out of it. He can't go back to it, but he has been there. And it is a fact that he has been cast down to the earth. So if you want to play all spiritual here on earth, if you want to say that the Holy Spirit came upon me, if you want to pretend that Christianity is all about the Spirit, I'm telling you, that's the only spirit that's down here that can be ascribed to a significant number of people would be Hasatan's. He is the spirit who was cast down to earth. Now, it's possible to have Yahweh's spirit, but if you're going to have Yahweh's spirit, you know it because he told you so. Towrah, for example, has the seven spirits of Yahweh. But he's it right now, today. Full stop. So the adversary, Hasatan, wants to be over and above the stars, the most luminous and highest places, even the best and brightest of God. This tells you that he wants to be above because it's of God. He wants to be above all of the gods and goddesses of yesteryear. Yeah, that would be the likes of Zeus, Jupiter, Mercury, Dionysus, Bacchus, Osiris, Ra, Tammuz, Bel, Baal, Astarte. There's lots of them. Lots and lots of false gods and goddesses. He wants to be above them. You know, all of the mythology of religion through the ages. He wants to be superior to the pagan gods and goddesses. All right. What more does it mean? Well, Yahweh specifically spoke of a greater and lesser luminary, did he not? And it's in the fourth day of creation. It's not when the sun or the moon were created. They had to be created prior to that time, prior to the earth being created, prior to life emerging from the seas, plant life. And so he's not speaking on the fourth day of the creation of the sun and the moon. He's speaking of introducing a greater and lesser luminary associated with the fourth day that will serve as signs pointing to the moed, which are the 7 invitations to meet with God, these restoring witnesses. So who would they be? Well, Dode fulfilled the first 3, did he not? And year 4000 Yah, commiserate with the fourth day. They would be Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim. Dode is the great luminary. And as the greater luminary, Yahweh identifies him as such because Yahweh says in the 89th Psalm that when he returns, Dode will be as brilliant as the sun. He also says in the next line how important the relationship will continue to be between the sun and the moon. And that is because the lesser luminary that reflects the sun's light is the one who not only fulfills the next 2 Moed Mikre, Shabua, and Towrah, but is the one who enables, therefore, the return of Dode on Kippurim, so that a mortal remnant can return and enter the garden on Sukkah. So these are the 2 individuals who fulfill the Moed Mikre. They are not only linked in that way, but it is the responsibility of the greater luminary, the single most important person who ever lived, David, our Messiah, our King, the very Son of God, and our Savior. It is incumbent upon the lesser luminary, the one reflecting his brilliance, to reintroduce you to him, to explain what he achieved, how, why, when, where, and how you can capitalize upon what he is offering. That is the relationship between these 2. And of course, Hasatan wants to rise above them. That is why it is the corporeal expression of the adversary of Satan, Donald Trump, who arranges to bludgeon me and take my life on the Temple Mount with my advocacy. I will have all of the Malach that currently protect me, and I will have the 7 spirits of Yahweh who enable me to stand aside so that he can take the physical life out of my physical body so I can fulfill the role of the Adamah Parah on Towrah. Because Yahweh will use that sacrifice to purge the mortal remnant of Yisrael of their religiosity. Hasatan wants to rise above all of that. So, he wants to be the greatest of God, rising above Dode as the greatest luminary and above his lesser luminary that exposes all that Dode represents. If he does that, there is no chance that the next 2 Moed Mikre are fulfilled. There will be no fulfillment of Shabua and Towrah if he were to succeed in that. If he gets the best of me, there's no fulfillment of Shabua or Towrah, and he knows it. If he gets the best of me, of the lesser luminary, there's no sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, there's no mortal remnant of Yisrael, prepared for Dod's return with Yahowah, which means that Yom Kippurim is not fulfilled, and there's no one to enter the millennial Shabbat of Sukkah. And we have a clean sweep, because it's also true that not a soul on this planet would have capitalized on Dod's sacrifice on Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim in 4000 Yah, year 33 CE, because they would have known nothing about it. Satan prevails. So taking out, discounting, abusing, attacking the lesser luminary, who was the one delivering this message to you, Dod's herald, is essential to him. If he prevails, if he can garner the support of enough politically minded MAGAs or Marxists or Christians or Muslims or conspiratorialists, anti-Semites on X and Facebook to discredit my testimony, as they're trying to do in this mother goddess cult of conspirators. You get enough people to do that, and you will diminish my effectiveness. You diminish my effectiveness, there will be less people that will be part of the Shabuah and the Towrah harvest. There'll be less people that can be purged of their religiosity to enter the millennial Shabbat. Now, I'm here to tell you, you can't stop me. But Satan is going to be all in with trying to discredit me. And there are lots of people, including those who were originally part of the family, who are actively engaged in doing so. And they will have an effect. Satan isn't playing around for nothing. You know, X isn't an anti-Semitic swamp for nothing. You know, our growth on Facebook wasn't stymied for nothing. Our message on X isn't throttled for nothing. They play hard. Satan plays hardball. And he is all about lifting up and exalting and increasing his throne. That's what it says. His seat of power. Now, what that means, by the way, is that by Satan lifting up his throne, his seat in power, thrones are almost always political entities, are they not? So Satan is a political actor in addition to a religious actor. He is not just the antichrist. He is not just the Lord of Christianity, the Hashem of Judaism, and the Allah of Islam. He is hugely influential in the political movements of man, Marxism, fascism, communism, and he is hugely influential in the EU, the UK, the United States, among politicians. And he's not sitting on the sideline either. He's front and center. Then it says, I will establish and inhabit a dwelling place on the mount of the eternal witness to the restoring appointments. There are two there now, aren't there? You got the dome of the Houthi print, the dome of Islamic and Allahu Akbar arrogance, along with a mosque of intolerance. You have two, Alaska Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. They are shrines to Satan. God told you in the 14th chapter of Isaiah that Satan would do this very thing. It's one of the reasons I'm so critical of Israelis of not having the fortitude to tear down those two buildings. They should be razed to the ground. They should be razed to the ground yesterday. And if Jews do not do it, I will. When I return with Elia, I don't have very many requirements, but that's one of them. I'm allergic to Islam. Not afraid of it, I despise it. And there is no way in the world that you're going to see either one of those two buildings as a backdrop to the place that we will be conveying God's message. They will be razed to the ground. So either you do it now and you can take credit for it. See how God responds to you when you do it. or you can wait and I'll do it, or I'll have Yahweh do it. I'm not going to claim to usurp his authority in this matter, but we will do it. And we're going to reestablish the tent of the restoring witness in that place until Yahweh returns with Dode, at which time Dode will have the honors of being able to build an eternal house for Yahweh's name and for the covenant family. But in the meantime, you have Hasatan, and he has his dome and his mosque there. That is what he said he was going to do. That is what he has done. Therefore, seeing this in this place, you must read this as this was a deliberate act of Satan through Islam to desecrate the Temple Mount and to claim that he is Allahu Akbar, that Allah is greater than God, that he's greater than Yahweh. That is the intent. And so this is really a horrible statement, is it not? Now, you will also read in the book of Ezekiel, which I have proven, the 3 volumes of Babel, which I have proven is not from God, but is in fact Satan's autobiography and playbook. That in that book, in the last third of the book, you have a copper con. This obviously is a real estate developer. He is measuring out the gaudy dimensions of this horrid monstrosity that would not only cover the Temple Mount, but cover all of Jerusalem and cover most of Judea. It's Trumpitis, Trump Tower on steroids beyond imagination. That is what is being foretold. And the man is a copper con that is doing it. Of course, that's Donald Trump. And when we read that, what we find is that that is Satan's ultimate goal. That's why you can read this and read that and say, oh yeah, that's Satan claiming he's going to do this very thing. He's going to pave over not only the Temple Mount, not only over Jerusalem, he's going to claim all of Judea for himself and his naming rights over this grotesque monstrosity. We also know that the book of Ezekiel is false for a number of other reasons. One is there is no accurate prophecy in it. The prophecies that are provided in it are all fake. There is no Gog, there is no Magog, there will be no War of Armageddon. There's no Valley of the Dry Bones. But beyond the fact that there is no accurate prophecy in it, and it claims to be prophetic, the book specializes, the first half of the book presents 25 torturous ways to abuse and kill Jews. God's not into how many ways can I abuse and kill my people. There are 2 graphic and horrific rape scenes. Why? Because Satan has a type, and they are based upon presenting Hasatan as a pedophile and rapist. And so those are not things of God either. And the 2 depictions of the heavenly scene, they are Babylonian. They are filled with astrological signs. They are very similar to how Hasatan would present himself. So we know the book is false, but the book makes these claims in terms of fulfilling this particular prophecy. Now, he's not going to get that right. He is going to witness us destroy his Dome of the Rock. He's going to witness us destroy his Alaska Mosque, and he is not going to be able to construct anything on that Temple Mount. I will assure you of that. Anyway, that will be his goal, and he says he will do so in association with the distant boundaries and the depths below to the summit above. That is why I have pointed out that if you use the measurements that Hasatan used and the book of Ezekiel, what you find is that his new temple, shrine to himself, isn't just on the Temple Mount. It isn't just paving over all of Jerusalem. It's like in the range of 2/3 of the entire size of Judea. And so it is from the very distant boundaries and from the depths below. That's what we're dealing with here. An ego the size of the devil himself. An ego that could only be compared to one man today, the ultimate narcissist and psychopath, Donald J. Trump. And it's all to conceal that which is treasured. Now, Zaphon is typically rendered north, but the word actually is based upon a root that means treasured. So it is to pave over, to replace everything that is treasured. The city of Dod, Zion, the signs that are posted along the way, the summit of Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount, the ultimate home that will be built on top of that Temple Mount for the covenant family and for Yahweh, and for us to enjoy. The beloved city of Jerusalem. He wants to conceal it all and to conceal everything that occurred there, including what David actually achieved by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim in that very place. That is what he has achieved, striving to achieve. So I hope I didn't wear you out here with a too detailed a presentation of Isaiah 14:13, but there are a lot of insights here, and I wanted you to have an appreciation for what is being conveyed, because Yahowah, he's a really special, gifted man. Well, Yahweh obviously inspired him, and he is writing about things that God told him about, and that he was actually able to witness by having his soul taken forward in time and then back in time again to write about it, as the nature of Yahweh's ability with his prophets. He is just an extraordinary man. He is the man who was the first to really put God's whole story together from beginning to end. I think he did a marvelous job. I just think he is a great treasure, which is one of the reasons I'm so grateful that we have the great Isaiah scroll. So those who seek acclaim, as Hasatan does, the adversary, Satan, seldom deserve it. And we'd be better off without having drawn undue attention to themselves. Now, I can speak personally to this. I began, and for the first 10 years that I did this on behalf of Yahweh, with the exception of exposing and condemning Islam, which I felt I should have the fortitude and the confidence in Yahweh to write Prophet of Doom in my own name, and I did. And now that it is goddamn religion, it's still under my name. I have that much confidence in Yahweh that I will be the only person to ever expose and condemn Islam effectively and survive it. So I wrote that on my own name. I did 10,000 radio interviews on virtually every syndicated radio program in the Western world under my actual name, because I have no fear. I have total confidence in Yahweh's commitment to protect me, because, well, he promised to do so. And because, quite frankly, I'm doing as he requested and doing a very important mission for him. When I began translating Yahweh's Torah, prophets, and Psalms from the Dead Seas, from the oldest extant witnesses, and scrubbing them of the rabbinic diacritical markings, all of my books didn't have that name. There was none of them. You couldn't even find that name anywhere associated with Yada Yahowah. Yada Yahowah. You see, that means to know Yahweh. This is the name that I cared about, and this name was only used because I came to know this name, and this verb here that serves as a name, and one Yahweh uses quite frequently as Yada Yahowah, is to say it's important that you know, appreciate, understand, and acknowledge Yahweh. But the name at the bottom, it was Yada, one who'd come to know. And I did that for the first 10, 12 years that we were together. And then one day, it became obvious that Yahweh had a title that he wanted me to use to convey this message to his people and to the world. The first was Choter. It's in Yeshaya 11. The entire chapter is devoted to it. The next is Nakri, which in Isaiah is Nakar, same word, which means observant foreigner. And then there was Bashar Herald serving Dode. Then there was the lesser luminary of Barashith. And then there's the Adam of Parah, the bloody red man of the earth who is a productive bull. And then there's Yada, as a name, one who knows. And then there's the cold voice of Yahowah. And then there was the final of the three Zeroahs, the one cultivating these harvests. It was on and on and on and on, with perhaps in the range of as many as 1,000 prophetic statements regarding the role that this individual as the bull would play in the end, and how important it was for the fulfillment of these Moed Mikre. That's why I introduced this program by saying that Dode did the work. He fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, but nobody knows about him. Had I not accepted Yahowah's request and served in this regard. And so Yahowah is really unique in the sense that he makes no attempt to do anything on his own. He does everything through people. And those people that he chooses to work through, he discloses. In fact, he makes it an important distinction that you know who God is communicating through because he tells you about them. And he wants you to know them because he wants you to trust what they're saying. He wants you to listen to what they're saying. He wants you to act upon it. That's why in Solomon's speech on Towrah, at the dedication of the house of Yahweh's name on the summit of Mount Moriah, God was really clear. This Nakri, who is a Zeroah named Yada, is going to speak as his voice was coming out of the sky to you wherever it is that you live, and you need to listen to him. And so it was essential to complete this mission as Yahweh intended, that I do the thing that I least wanted to do. And that is to shed anonymity and to acknowledge the obvious, that Yahweh wanted his people to listen because he was announcing that he was speaking through this individual. And with that, you become a target. With that, you gain responsibility. With that, your life is forever changed. It is what I wanted the least. I think it was the second most difficult thing that Yahweh asked of me, and the most difficult by far was not becoming the Adam of Parah and knowing that I'm going to be bludgeoned to death on the Temple Mount on Towrah in 2033. I'm delighted that that's going to happen. I get rid of my physical body and accomplish something really worthwhile. It's a lovely thing to be able to do. No, the most difficult, when after shedding anonymity, God said, I want you to go into social media and we're going to proclaim this message. You're going to turn on the camera. You're going to get a microphone. You're going to have the lights, and you're going to speak directly to my people through the Yahowah blog. And to be exposed in social media in that way is to endure what Moshe and Dode endured. People are really mean. They don't like God. They don't like what he had to say. And if you speak for him, they're vicious. That's the toughest ask along the way. So I would tell Hasatan, if he would listen to me, that, and he's nowhere to be found around me, that trying to draw attention to yourself is a terrible move. It always ends poorly. You ought not seek fame. So arrogance is the product typically of insecurity and of hiding it by pretending otherwise. Those who are comfortable in their own skin and confident in what they know and what they're doing shun the burden to the greatest extent possible. Even when it is God-given, a claim puts a target on the recipient, and it makes them ever more susceptible to attack. Now, I know this all too well, because in preparation for this job, I lived most of my life in and out of the spotlight. And if it were not from Yahowah, referring to the role that he has asked me to play as the lesser luminary, reflecting his son's brilliance, as the Nakar, observant foreigner, as the Choder, stem from the main branch. I would have loved being anonymous as Yada. You have all the benefits and none of the responsibility. But that wasn't what God wanted. And, God has been disappointed by his people for far too long. He deserves better. And although he should have been able to find much better than me, he couldn't, because there was no one willing to listen to God and do these things. Makes me very sad for God. I am exceedingly disappointed for him that I was the best he could find. He deserves better. And many times I say, God, what in the world were you thinking, choosing me to do this for you? And then I hear him, what in the world are you saying, kid? Look at you. You've written 35 books, by the way. The most recent that I've written, Towrah, Time of Trouble, is now published on the Yada Yahowah site. Joe Page and I had a lovely conversation this morning, and it is right there, published. The 9th volume of Yada Yahowah this is the volume 5 of that series. Volume 9 is up. It's 825 pages. It's up there, and it's all of its beauty. You can go to YAHOWAH.com now and read the entirety of it. I want to thank in particular Mike Biotti and my good friend J.K. James for editing this book. They went through it multiple times. I also had help editing from Mariah, but the dedication to fact-checking and editing that Mike and James have done, it's astounding. And then for Joe to take that book in such short period of time after they finished their 3rd and 4th edit passes of it, and to get it up as a book on the site, I'm so grateful. And now we have Anthony taking over from what Joe is doing to get all of these books now presented correctly at Amazon, and then Rich and Mariah working together to improve some of the internal text and to make corrections. I am just really, really grateful for the support. This is a job that cannot be done alone, even with the 7 spirits of Yahowah. And in this process, one of the things I've come to recognize is that Moshe was a great man. And yet he let God down. He didn't finish the job. He did not get the children of Israel into the promised land. And he quit many times. He fell on his face before God rather than defending Yahweh to his people. And you'd be hard-pressed to find a person of greater character, intellect, stamina than this man, who made so many wonderful choices and served us so very, very well. And yet, he couldn't get the job done. Even with Yahweh standing beside him and telling the people, I am God, I am speaking through him, they told God to shut up and go away. Never wanted to hear from him or see from him again. Now, it wasn't Moshe's fault. His audience was impossible. Yeah, as I said, I think you could search the world and you'd probably find one person in the entire world better than Moshe, and that would be Dod. But similarly, Dod didn't get the job done either. Yes, he wrote a whole lot of Mashal, Proverbs, and Mizmor, Psalms, and they're brilliant. And yes, he defended Israel successfully on 66 battles and won every one of them with Yahweh's support. And most importantly, Dod did the most amazing thing of all. He volunteered to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, to have his body bludgeoned by Romans and crucified, and then have his nephesh soul carry our guilt into Sheol, hell, so that we could be perfected. There is no greater love, nor compassion, nor competence than what he displayed. And yet at the end of his first life, he didn't get it done. Israel turned against him, turns against Yahowah. And it went downhill under his son, Solomon. And soon Israel was fractured. Dowd is the greatest man who ever lived. Most brilliant, most courageous, most devoted to Yahowah. The one man who was consistently right with God. And yet at the end, he gave up too. And so now here we are at the end, only 8 years left. And God deserves better. I don't care what they throw in my face. We're going to see this through. We're going to do our utmost together, collectively, as a covenant family devoted to Yahowah and his children. We're going to see this through. We're not going to quit. Because quite frankly, in this particular case, giving up would mean the destruction of the earth. I mean, no one in the Shabuah harvest, no one in the Towrah harvest, no beneficiaries of the Adam of Parah, no one to see Dowd's return, no one to enter the millennial Shabat, no purpose for the earth. Total disappointment to God. We're not going to do that. Now, I can say that, well, we can rest assured that God has actually written the final chapter and he's pleased with the result. He's pleased with the effort that we put in right to the very end. He speaks of the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah. So we make it to that far. We get this done. He speaks of bringing his people into Jerusalem to be purged and entering the millennial Shabbat. And so he talks about his son's glorious return and how he is a very proud father with him. And we see how this remnant of Israel will cry for the firstborn. We're told all of this. And so you might say, well, God's already told us the future and it all turns out well. So what are you worried about? You know why it turns out well? Because I'm worried about it. Because we don't give up. It doesn't happen that way by chance. It happens that way because we've already devoted 24 years to learning, to growing, to sharing, to thousands of profound insights that no one had ever conceived previously, for being the first to understand exactly what David achieved and why Jesus never existed, being the first to systematically disprove not only Christianity, but Islam and Judaism so that the truth could be known. It gets done because of 24 years already and 32 by the time we're finished of complete devotion to Yahowah, his people, and his son, and being impervious to all of the ongoing criticism. We get the job done. Now, that is why God said, I don't want you to be anonymous. They need to know who you are. They need to know that I have chosen to empower you with the seven spirits of Yahowah. I've given you my very name, the Spirit of Yahowah. I have given you beyond the ability to make intelligent connections. I have given you chakma, the ability to think beyond what others have ever perceived previously. I've given you the spirit of Gabor, courage, confidence, being a fighter, a man of endurance right to the very end. I have given you the spirit of Etzah, the ability to see the entire picture and to provide counsel on it. I've given you the spirit of Diyat, of knowledge, because you're serving as the branch of the tree of Diyat, of knowledge, directing people back to the tree of lives, which is David. I've given you the spirit of Yira, of respect and reverence for all that I represent and for my name and for my story. And because of all of these things, we're in a position to do this. But we also have a devoted family who is committed to sharing this message, to conveying it as boldly and as effectively and as broadly as is absolutely possible. That's why we prevail. So had I been anonymous, I would not have perceived this pronouncement as Satan's desire to bring Dode and I down, and the role that we play together, just as the moon reflects the sun's light in the darkest hours. I would not have known how the entire story that God is presenting fits together and the way that it ultimately leads to the restoration of his people, of his covenant, of the living embodiment of the Torah being placed inside of us, the eradication of all politics and religion, and the restoration of the earth back into the conditions of Eden. I'd like for you to join us. I thank you for listening.